Radio. A biography or a long mystery, a picture book filled with history. Was it a fiction book or one that helps you to cook? Call us now, we'll talk about your book. Some travel tales or a book about whales, reading poetry or the dictionary, onto a fantasy place or a book about space. Call us now, let's talk about your book. Now where are my glasses? Okay, page 1.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to A Kind Voice on Books. I'm your host, Eden Blackwell, and tonight's episode is about storytelling. Everyone has a story. Plenty of people have lots of stories. Some of us make up stories for others. Joining me tonight to talk about stories and to talk with you about your story is Dr. John Brailsford. Dr. John is a trained therapist in the Provo area of Utah, and he's got some experience with telling stories. And instead of introducing him more fully, I'd really like for Dr. John to tell his story. How are you doing, John?
Doing great. Dr. John takes me back. I actually was trained in the panhandle of Florida and southern Georgia, and they called me Dr. John. I tried to explain to them I didn't have my PhD yet, I wasn't, and they just said, let us call you Dr. John, and so that's what they called me back in the day, before I'd even earned the title.
And have you've earned it now, right?
I have, back in the 90s, actually.
Well, how has that brought you around to knowing a little something about storytelling?
Yeah, well, storytelling, that's kind of what I do for fun on the side sometimes. Really, early on in my career as a therapist, what I realized was in almost every session, I was sharing stories. The thing about therapy is sometimes you'll want to share information that'll be useful to the client that they can take and then they can use to transform their lives or learn to, do it maybe a better way, a more effective way. And it's hard, you can't just tell them straight up, hey, do this, because often there's a resistance to that, particularly if it's really different from what they've been doing. Sometimes, when things go wrong, we don't try to find a new way. We try to do the old way with greater intensity. So
right.
If we respond to someone who's annoying us by yelling at them, we think, and it doesn't work, we think to ourselves, well, maybe I need to yell a little louder. And so next time we try it a little louder. And obviously that doesn't work. And over time you want to say, hey, what's an alternative? And when you just tell them the alternative, sometimes they resist that. But sometimes if you tell them the alternative in a story, maybe a story about someone else or in a different time, or maybe even a symbolic story, a story of an animal or an imaginary figure. All of a sudden, their mind opens, their heart opens to maybe a new way of life, and they're willing to consider it in ways they wouldn't have if you just told them straight up. So that's kind of what led me to really get interested in how can you share a meaningful story in such a way that it really, gets in there and influences someone in their lives. And so it took me from, the therapeutic use of storytelling into more of the art form over time. So
you went looking for technique?
Yeah, first of all, I didn't even know there was an art form. And really, there probably was a time when it wasn't even considered an art form. It was just what we do as human beings. We naturally tell stories. And our brains and our hearts naturally latch on to the meaning in stories, easier than just being told straight up. So it made sense. But over the years, especially in the last century, maybe in the last couple centuries, what we've found is people really started to get serious about, what makes a story a really good story, or what makes the telling of that story really meaningful to the people who listen to that story. And so I wanted to know that, too, because I thought it would help me become a much more effective therapist. As it turns out, it helped me become a much more effective husband and father, a much more effective friend and family member. You know, it just helped me share experiences in such a way that people could identify more with what I was talking about. So storytelling, the art form, is really sort of an interactive art, and I would say the two mediums it uses are words and actions, to kind of reveal meaning in such a way that the listener becomes engaged and is able to understand and apply the experience to their lives. So if I could define it, that, you know, I'd probably add those elements. And eventually it led to the Storytelling Guild, which is a group of people, both professional and amateur, that get together and learn about storytelling. And it also led, you know, to learning more about the storytelling festivals, you know, throughout America, and gave me opportunities to go and hear people who are really good at it share their stories.
So what are some of those festivals?
Two biggest ones in North America are, first, the National Storytelling Festival. That's held every year in Jonesboro, Tennessee, and that's one of the oldest ones, and the one that people go to. You know, people back east, that would be the one they'd want to go to, would be close to them. But the second biggest is the Timpanogos Storytelling Festival, and that's out here in Utah County, which is Provo, Orem, you know, American Forks, little towns like that in sort of in central Utah. And Timpanogos Storytelling Festival out here is just, I've gone to that a couple times, and it's just a great experience. You can learn not only about the storytelling, but you can enjoy performances. And it's really for all ages. They even have competitions of youth tellers, you know, where, wow, you know, kids anywhere from, you know, 6, 7, 8 years old on up, you know, can share their stories. And it's amazing how impactful those stories can be, even from an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old, you know, someone who's still in grade school.
So you said the Timpanogos Story Festival. Well, tell me about that. What is that?
You know, there's a mountain that rises above the valley. It's the second biggest mountain in Utah, second highest peak. And it's called Mount Timpanogos. And my understanding is in Paiute, the word means river of rock. So it looks like a big flowing river of rock, big gray mountain towering above us, and it's very impressive. And so a lot of the things down in the valley, businesses and schools and things like that, are named after Timpanogos, and either that or Timp, as we call it for short.
Well, that's really cool. I mean, I suppose every place name does imply a story.
It does.
You know, how does a town get its name? There's a town in the state in Mississippi where I live called Delo, D''Lo. And but one of the stories to explain why Delo is called Delo is that when they were surveying, it was so darn low, and next to the water, and it flooded, and it still floods like every year. And they're like, yeah, what do you expect? It's so darn low here, and that's, you know, we're in Delo.
It's the Venice of the South, you know. It's covered in water.
It does a little better, I think.
Absolutely.
But names imply stories.
Exactly, and that's often how we get names, is it comes from a story. You know, Timpanogos, the story is told of a maiden who lost her love, and the mountain actually looks like a woman laying down on her back with her face up to the clouds and her hands over her heart, and so there's even that romantic side of Timpanogos, you know, that here's this mountain with a kind of that old Indian legend behind it. Mm-hmm. And anyway, and I always love those old stories, those old legends. So
yeah, too. I mean, they're incredible. Their ability to explain the world around us, and you said it's from a Native American tribe, and
right.
So, you know, not in a time
it's actually
of science.
One of the Ute tribes, and for which Utah is named. And
Ute.
Yeah, Ute, exactly.
Go figure.
So, go figure. Yeah, that's where they got the name. It actually means people of the mountain, I believe,
people
is what Utah means. Right, or top of the mountain. People of the top of the mountain. And so Utah means the land at the top of the mountain. So.
And then there was this one mountain that looked like a lady laying down, sad and forlorn, and they named the mountain for her.
Yeah, Timpanogos, the river of rock, and you can think of a river of tears, you know, and for lost love, so forlorn. Yeah.
Well, that definitely has a way of making everyday life a little more interesting.
Right. Yeah, she's always there.
Least.
Wherever you go, all you have to do is turn in her direction, and you can't miss her when she's 12,000 feet above sea level.
That's an
in fact,
awesome
a lot of people
story.
that come from back east are pretty impressed. You know, they rarely see, have seen, even in pictures, mountains that size. So. Right.
Everything else is a hill.
Exactly.
Well, so you're not native to Utah then?
I actually grew up in southern Nevada. I'm a desert kid. I grew up in North Las Vegas, Nevada. So I was used to red rock and sandstone and dry weather and roadrunners and coyotes. So.
Yeah. Well, good for you. Well, I always feel like I've lived around in a few different states and different regions, and whenever I get to a new place, and if it looks really differently, so I'm from the Deep South, and I moved to the West Coast for a while, and I was just more attuned to their stories and their explanation and, their different cultures, and the stories explain that, and it seems you caught that bug too, and
absolutely, yeah, it does. It helps you adjust to a culture. It helps you. I actually have lived in Europe, and I have family in Mexico and family in Canada, and so when you in order to kind of link to them, to join with them, very often you tell stories. You tell what the experience is like living in those places, and it kind of brings you closer to home in a quicker way than just, observing what's going on. You can be brought up to speed by the stories people tell.
Right. And, yeah, just a quick, this is what life is like, everybody, for me, out here alone in this place.
Exactly. And you find some things that are unique, but what's ironic is almost always you find what's not unique. It's just very common to everyone everywhere. And that's really the biggest power of what's very common and what binds us together, as human beings.
I'd like to ask more questions about that. Why don't we take a quick break? So everybody, y'all come on back, and we'll talk some more.
A Kind Voice is a call-in line that lives upstream from depression hotlines. You don't need to be experiencing a crisis to call us. Our volunteers take calls on a book you read, a movie or game you saw, or just about anything you'd like to discuss. Call 800-876-2399 to speak with a Kind Voice. Our volunteers aren't professional counselors. They're kind voices who are here for you. Call 800-876-2399 or visit us at akindvoice.org.
Here's some snippets of some of the other wonderful programs you'll hear on A Kind Voice Radio.
Good evening. Welcome again to this week's episode of A Kind Voice Radio. You are listening to The Good News Show. I'm your host, Dean Buchanan. This is A Kind Voice on Good News, where all news is good news all of the time. No negative news here.
Welcome to another episode of A Kind Voice on Movies. I'm your host for the evening, Zenobia Elise. We've got an exciting program planned for you tonight. So with that being said, let's go to the movies.
Let's talk sports on the radio. Let's talk sports on the radio. Baseball and football, any kind of sports will do. Let's talk sports on the Kind Voice Radio.
And good evening, everyone, and welcome to A Kind Voice on Sports. This is your host, Demetrius Means. And, folks, I've got a good show for you this evening.
Good evening. This is Dr. V.M. Mayfield, and I'm delighted to welcome you to A Kind Voice on Employment, Opportunity, and Innovation. Tonight, Our topic is the game changers, or how individuals are transforming lives as part of their business.
I'm Pete Kramer here with my good friend Bruce Gramel, and in case anybody doesn't know that, the bumps that you hear on the way into the program are written and performed by Bruce, and if you want to hear some more excellent music from that gentleman, go to ReverbNation.com/Bruce Gramel, that's Graml, and hear some pretty cool tunes.
Lots of ways to lend your kind voice and positive energy to our program. You can volunteer on our call-in line. You can participate in any of our radio programs. You can help sponsor our program. Or, if you have a kind voice and a song in your heart, you can create a song that we might play on the radio.
Hi, this is Bruce Gramel. I wrote my song, The Alchemy of Kindness, after I became familiar with the organization called A Kind Voice. A Kind Voice is a community of volunteers that provide the opportunity for conversation on a variety of topics. The title is one of their slogans, and the phrase really hits home with me. I hope that you'll enjoy my song, and whether you may be a caller or a future volunteer, I hope you'll take the time to find out more about the wonderful folks at A Kind Voice.
The alchemy of kindness is one that we believe. When we reach out to each other, you know we both receive. We're always here for you. We're right beside the phone. When kind voices come together, it seems we're never alone. So if you're reaching out, you know we're reaching too. Pick up the phone, that's all you have to do. Call us now if you need a kind voice. If you need a kind voice. If you got some good news you heard the other day. Maybe you read a good book you finished yesterday. How was that new movie you finally went to see? Is your favorite sports team as good as they should be? If you're feeling down and lonely, a friendly voice is just a call away. Call us now if you need a kind voice. If you need a kind voice. That new class you picked is harder than you thought. You got a good deal on the new car you bought. Your family's not home and your friends are away. Your daughter just called, your grandson took his first steps today. Sometimes we just need someone to talk to. You know we all need someone who listens well. Call us now if you need a kind voice. When you want a kind voice. When you need a kind voice. When you want a kind voice. Call us now if you need a kind voice.
And we're back with A Kind Voice on Books. I'm joined by Dr. John Brailsford. We're talking storytelling, and John uses storytelling in therapeutic counseling.
Yep.
And he's just telling us a little bit about how commonalities can be shared and expressed, and through storytelling, through our everyday lives and sharing the stories. And you were saying before the break, John, that it's useful in couples therapy and family therapy.
Absolutely, yeah. It helps with relationships. Sometimes it helps because people who are struggling with each other often feel that the other one is just in a completely different world from them, that they feel very separate. And sometimes what you can do with a story is you can bring people together. I should mention, by the way, that storytelling can actually is a powerful medium, but it can also be destructive. So I don't want to make it sound like stories are just wonderful, good things no matter what. Sometimes our stories can actually disguise us or hide us, not only from others but from ourselves. They have the power to lie, to give a false version of reality, to mislead people, and so we need to really, I think the most effective stories are the ones that really reflect reality as it is, and are also flexible, and realize that my perspective on my story may change over time. It may, and hopefully it will become more reflective of reality over time. And in order for that to happen, I need to be willing to, hold my thoughts lightly, not grab onto that story so tightly that I squeeze the life out of it, so to speak. And, for example, people will, have stories of victimization, or they'll have stories of that'll make it seem that their acts of abuse were actually warranted, or you see what I'm saying? And so we can have stories that reinforce things that we really probably don't want to be a part of our lives. But I like to think that most of us, when we tell our stories, we're actually just trying to share who we at least believe that we really are, and generally I think that turns out to be uplifting overall.
Well, in the sense that you hear one of those potentially destructive stories, how do you reframe it? How do you reorient the teller of the story to kind of be more aware of maybe how they're viewing things?
That's right.
Yeah.
And so maybe I'll just take you to therapy school here for a second.
Sure.
The answer to that question is there's many different ways to do that. Sometimes but obviously it's not telling them your story's messed up. As soon as you say that, it's kind of like, well, how dare you? And really, how dare I, to say such a thing? The fact is, what you can do is you can, what we call reframe. You can invite them to consider, other aspects of the story that maybe they have ignored over time. Maybe you can have them consider what they've, emphasized at the expense of those other things. And it's not to say that their story is wrong. Very often what it is they've just focused in on aspects of their story that reinforce who they want to be, rather than allowing their story to be whatever it was. And, because sometimes it's hard. Sometimes our stories are unflattering to us. Sometimes it's hard to admit that, I could have chosen a better way. Sometimes, quite honestly, our stories are too hard on us, and sometimes we need to maybe let go of some of the harshness and unkindness that we have toward ourselves and the lack of compassion. So,
and so that's a matter of perspective, then. You mean people are viewing themselves too harshly?
And it's hard to rewrite those stories sometimes when you're the one that lived them. You're convinced that you lived it just the way you're telling it. And so as a therapist sometimes, of course, as a therapist, as a third party, it's easy to look at the story and go, wow, I think they might be embellishing that one part, or not giving enough credit to that one person or to themselves, and so you're not telling them to, you're just inviting them to consider, could it be that there's a dimension of my story that I've ignored or that I've pushed aside. And often what you'll find is if there's a good relationship between the therapist and the client, they'll be very open, to considering other options. And at worst, they just say, I think I got that part right. And then you move on. But a lot of the time what they'll say is, you know what, I think I am being too hard on myself. Looking back with what I knew at the time, I think I was doing the best I could. Or they were doing the best they could. Or, whatever characters were involved in the story. And as their story becomes more authentic, closer to what really happened and representing who they truly are, generally the trend is toward more kindness, more compassion, more gentleness, and more peace and joy and all those other things, despite the challenges that came in their lives. And that's powerful. You know, that can lead to some pretty powerful changes in people's lives. So
yeah, I can imagine it. You know, being in a group setting, if I, you know, someone dear to me is sharing that story, and I hear what they're, you know, they're honest from their perspective.
It's one of the great strengths of group therapy, is that we're hearing a story that isn't too distant from our own, and when we hear not only how they felt defeated in some ways, but also how they triumphed, both can be really instructive to us. You know, for someone who experienced it in a way where they didn't handle it really well, it can remind us that maybe we did better than we might have imagined, and in the sense that they really did handle it in a way that was productive, it can show us the way so we can maybe incorporate that into our own approach. So both can be really useful. So and I've had a number of stories that I've used in therapy that, you know, I would have thought going in that, you know, if you're not like a guy who grew up in a rough neighborhood, you know, you're probably not going to get this stuff, and yet I'll share the story, you know, and I'll get a African-American woman from Georgia to totally buy in and just say, you're talking about me, you know, and that's what's really interesting about it.
That's really interesting. I read a story, an article last week about an Asian American man who grew up in Queens, New York, and he'd written this fabulous, critically acclaimed book about the American South in the 1920s from a poor black sharecropper's perspective. And everybody just absolutely said, there's no way. And when they, you know, like the quote-unquote authorities on that time and that kind of literature looked at it, you know, they were pretty amazed at just how, I suppose, detailed and how authentic the perspective was.
Absolutely.
But my thought is, you know, that takes a sensitive, observant person to be able to sort of capture that. And
right. And I think the greatest storytellers are the ones that look at their stories in an authentic way, and they're willing to share the good, the bad, and the ugly, and everything in between. And when they do, you know, people latch onto that. They realize, hey, this guy or this gal's being honest with me, and I can see myself in what they're saying.
That makes me think they have to be, or we have to be, good listeners to stories.
That certainly helps. Yeah, and there's things we can do as storytellers that can put people at ease, so it's easier for them to listen as well. You know, and
like
you know, there's
what?
this storytelling. You know, includes sort of like the narrative form and the language you use. So it's the structure of the story. It's the words you use to express, you know, what happens in the story. It includes also, though, beyond the words and the structure, it includes your voice, the pace, your gestures, your relationship with the audience. You know, how engaged are you with them as people? How much are you feeling for them and really enthusiastic about them becoming a part of this story? And, boy, when you combine all those elements together, it's almost like reading a good book, but it makes it easier to almost live it, you know. Good words and structure can only go so far, but a really good storyteller can take you to a place that's beyond sometimes where you can go in a book. And that being said, if you know good books, you know, I think it's easier to be a good storyteller because that piece of it you already understand.
I don't know necessarily tons of good books that capture storytelling, but you know, I can think of this movie called Big Fish. And it came out maybe late 90s, early 2000s, and it was about a storyteller, a man who just spun tales, and he just couldn't relate to his family and to his world without embellishing and making a tell of everything. That was his form of communication.
Yeah, and you know, in some respects that can be very therapeutic. The downside of that, you know, just is that it's not grounded in reality real strongly. And yet, if you think about movies and music and stuff, don't they kind of take us outside of our reality and into almost an imaginary land? It's like going to Disneyland for the day. And, you know, we can't in real life spend every day in Disneyland, but it's nice to go there every once in a while. So there's a place for that, I think, where you can kind of escape and embellish and do those things. The nice thing is to know deep down that you're doing that. And then as long as you know that and you're willing to come back to reality, you're probably going to be okay.
Cool. Thank you. Well, why don't we take a quick break? Everybody, come on back.
Zachary Aaron, welcome to Brooklyn. Everybody's happy that you came. Zachary Aaron, life here in Brooklyn will never ever be the same. Hey little one, hey little one, hey. Hey little one, hey little one, hey. Will you sing like a bird? Will you swim like a fish? Will you do all the things that your mom and dad wish? Whatever you do, just be you. Zachary Aaron, welcome to Brooklyn. Everybody's happy that you came. Zachary Aaron's life here in Brooklyn will never ever be the same. Will you run like the wind? Will you stand like a tree? Will you write a great book? By the time you are 3, whoever you are, you're a star. Zachary Aaron, welcome to Brooklyn. Everybody's happy that you came. Zachary Aaron's life here in Brooklyn will never ever be the same. Hey little one, hey little one, hey. Hey little one, hey little one, hey. Hey little one, hey little one, hey.
The Zachary Aaron song you were just listening to was written and sung by Sandy Kimmel to welcome Zachary Aaron to the world. When he was just beginning to talk, Zachary announced to anyone who would listen, "Hi, I'm Zachary. I'm from Brooklyn. They wrote a song about me." What a cool feeling. What a cool story. Our kind voices will write a custom song for a special person or occasion in your life, be it a birth or a birthday, wedding, a wedding anniversary, a tribute to a friend or coworker. We'll write the perfect song. What better way to lift the spirits of a sick friend than to present them with the gift of music? These songs will spread positive energy, and part of the proceeds will help raise funds for our work at A Kind Voice. We're happy to do a lighthearted song as well. Anyone who can use A Kind Voice at your company, your softball team, in your family, or maybe you need a personal theme song. Whatever the case, whatever the cause, we can write you a song. For more information, go to the Songs tab at akindvoice.org or call us at 1-800-876-2399, extension 99. I've been chatting with John Brailsford about storytelling and its therapeutic uses. You mentioned Timpanogos Storytelling Festival and the International Storytelling Festival. Are there actual seminars?
Yeah, and probably the best way is to get with your local organization, and that might be a guild or an association, or you can go to the Timpanogos Storytelling Festival website, and that's at timpfest.org, and you'll find that on the materials associated with this show. And there's also storytellingcenter.net, which is where the information on the National Storytelling Festival is. Let me give you another website that might be really good. If you're looking for organizations to become a part of, that would be what's called the National Storytelling Network, and you find that at storynet.org. Okay. And at that website, you'll notice that down the list on the left, there will be a place where you can find resources. And so it'll have links to resources is on that list. And at the very top of the resource page, there's a link that says Storytelling Organizations listed by state. And that will bring up all the states, all 50 states, and then you just click on your state, and there you'll see different guilds and associations and organizations and alliances. You know, they go by different names. And just click on the one closest to you, and or if they don't have a link, you can just go ahead and they'll have a phone number or something where you can get a hold of them and just invite them to share information and ask them how you can get involved.
That's cool. We'll explore that. We'll put that up on the Kind Voice Goodreads at the very least, so people can find that there. So, I was trying to think of other ways that we might be bumping into storytelling and not realize it. And I always think this time of year, getting around a campfire, getting on a hayride, and having a scary story because it's the season. But another way of storytelling that's really important, at least for history, is the historic reenactment. Where people dress up in hoop skirts or uniforms, and they kind of reenact either wars or just, what it's like to be Benjamin Franklin. And I'm just thinking of all the stuff along the East Coast where people kind of actually enacted daily life and then paused and then, oh, hey, there's this random group of tourists. I'll just tell them what life. And it's such a cool, it's very visual, and there's all this great setting, and there's the opportunity to then just kind of, share a historic event and moment, and it's really cool. I think that would be fun for anybody who had kind of an itch to get into period clothing and to act a little, to tell stories.
Well, and that's the thing; it takes you into a different time, a different experience, and yet you identify with those people, even though it was a very different time. And that's what's amazing about storytelling, is it helps expand your sense of self and realize there is more to me than this little story I told myself, and there are dimensions of my own story. My story is connected to every other story. And once you realize that, it really helps you become a more well-rounded, expansive, engaged human being, and that can be really powerful. And whether you're reading that in a book or watching someone tell it on a stage, that's the power of story, to change our lives for the better. There's some really great storytellers. If I could just name drop a couple people, if you look, Bill Harley is one of my favorites. He actually used music. He's really great with kids. But he will play that guitar and tell a story in a song that's a really amazing thing. And that's the thing, too. Sometimes people use music to do the telling. And then there's also a guy named Andy Offutt Irwin, IRWIN. And we can go ahead and put these names in the information related to this show as well. But
absolutely.
And then my favorite, this is a guy from down south, Donald Davis. Boy, that guy can just tell a story and leave you laughing or crying, in a way that I think it's almost hard for a book to do sometimes, although really good writers can make that happen too. But anyway, those are just some of the names of people that have this ability to bring you into a world they want to take you to and help you discover yourself there. And I think that's the key to good storytelling.
Are there stories like contemporary, or are they? For some reason, I always imagine they're telling them about pioneer days or trapper days, and
right. And you know what? Sometimes there are storytellers who are almost reenact historical events. So that's one. I guess that would be a genre within the genre. But my favorite storytellers are telling stories from their own life, to be quite honest. And what I find is they're telling my story. You know, I might not have known it when they started the story, but they're telling something that was really deeply meaningful to them, or really funny to them, or really sad to them. And in the telling of it, in a really effective way, they're kind of getting you to examine your own life and explore aspects of your life that you maybe hadn't considered for a really long time. Maybe they take you back to your childhood. Maybe they take you, to a faraway war that they experienced, or maybe a heartache in a relationship, or maybe just something really hilarious that happened, their first day of college, or when they started their business, or something like that, where you say, "Oh my gosh, that's exactly the kind of thing that happened to me when I did the same." And as soon as they do that, they got you. And once they got you, into that world, all of a sudden, it becomes a transformative experience. And I'll hear a good story, and I'll go home, and it might be weeks or months later, and I'll think back on that experience, and I'll learn something new. So. And isn't a good book like that too?
It is for me.
Absolutely.
What is storytelling like? I mean, it's with children. Do you have to approach it differently? I mean, they're so open to believing just about anything, but they're also pretty sneaky on detail. You got to be
right.
In my experience, you got to know what you're saying. Don't get your lines crossed.
Right. Don't think you can pull the wool over their eyes. In fact, I would say in some ways children are more perceptive about when you're not being genuine. That being said, if you are genuine and you really are pouring out your soul, I think they'll jump right into it and go. And they'll get into that place. I think for them, what they like it a little more animated, and nothing. The words not so fancy. For them, I think it's more about the emotion behind the words, and not the words themselves that matter. They love music. If you can put it to song, and especially if it's a upbeat and funny song, oh my goodness, they will eat that alive. So. But think about that too. Some of my favorite moments in my life were telling stories to my children as they went to bed. And in fact, as you were mentioning, telling stories to our children, I just thought of my great uncle had a cabin up on the other side of Mount Timpanogos, and my dad used to tell us Bigfoot stories, and you could tell as I look back that he was making them up as he went along, kind of thing. And they'd always have this scary ending with Bigfoot looking through our window, or something like that. And there we were up in the dark mountain, with nobody around us and very few lights, and it just it made that experience so much more meaningful.
That's another cool aspect of storytelling, is sort of the regional beast.
Right.
Lately down in my area, there's been a few chupacabra sightings, right. And so a lot of older people, who've been around for a couple more chupacabra sightings have kind of gotten in talking about seeing them out in the swamp, or one running across the pasture with a chicken in its mouth, and just it's incredible how many chupacabras there are running around this county. But
and it enlivens their imagination and lets them enjoy their lives. When you share those things with children.
John, it's been fabulous talking to you about storytelling. Clearly, there's so many ways that storytelling can really add to daily life, and I appreciate you telling us about them. Is there anything you want to leave us with?
The most important story to use, the story of your life, and probably the best way for that to influence your life from this moment on is for you to look at that life in a very sincere and open and honest way, take the good with the bad, and then take what you learned and apply it. And in this very moment, the only moment you have complete control over is right now.
That's great advice. Thank you, Dr. John Brailsford, for being with us tonight. We've absolutely enjoyed it.
Great. Thanks, Eden.
We're going to take a short break. So come on back after the break.
Your sister has a birthday. She's 39 again. Get her something special. You know she's your best friend. Your father is retiring after all these years. Show him just how proud you are in front of all his peers. Let us write you a song. They'll hear a kind voice and you know they'll want to sing along. Let us write you a song. It's coming from the heart and you know that can never be wrong. Your friend is gonna graduate, she finally made it through. Why don't you give her something special now? It's such a sweet thing to do. If your anniversary's coming up, for you and your bride, let her know what it means to you to have her there by your side. Let us write you a song. They'll hear a kind voice and you know they want to sing along. Let us write you a song. It's coming from the heart and you know that can never be wrong.
Be it a birth or birthday, a wedding or wedding anniversary, to celebrate a coworker's years of service or to honor a dear friend, we'll create the perfect song for your special person or occasion. For more information, please visit the Song Request tab at akindvoice.org or call us at 800-876-2399 extension 99 and we'll get started.
Let us write you a song. They'll hear a kind voice and you know they'll want to sing along. Let us write you a song. It's coming from the heart and you know that can never be wrong. Let us write you a song.
Life is all about experiences, right? Maybe you just saw the best movie ever. Maybe your St. Bernard decided to share the couch with you. Maybe your team just won the big game on the final play. Although each experience is unique, they all share one thing. You want to talk about them. Well, now is the perfect time to chat with A Kind Voice. The super friendly folks at A Kind Voice want to hear about your experiences, from everyday stuff like books, movies, music, news, sports, and pets, to big ideas and philosophy. Call 800-876-2399 to talk right now. No worries, it's all free. A Kind Voice just wants you to know they're waiting to talk to awesome people like you. 800-876-2399. A Kind Voice is a nonprofit organization powered by volunteers and doesn't provide professional advice. Call them at 800-876-2399 or go to akindvoice.org for more information.
Welcome back to A Kind Voice on Books. This is Eden Blackwell, your host. Tonight we've been talking about storytelling. We've had Dr. John Brailsford from the Provo, Utah area. He's been on sharing with us his experience with storytelling as an art, but also its therapeutic uses, the way that we can relate with family members and friends and maybe just explore and re-examine our own lives through stories. Yeah, we've all got stories to tell, whether they're embarrassing moments that we can now, appreciate for what they are and laugh about, or whether they are stories of personal triumph or struggle. And I want to give you an opportunity or a resource for telling your story, because it's valuable and there's a lot people can learn from you. You can explore storytelling through StoryCorps at StoryCorps.org. And StoryCorps is very cool, I think. It's one of the largest oral history projects, gathering personal stories and experiences of anybody who will take the time to share it. Anybody off the street can approach a StoryCorps location and record a personal experience. But since 2003, StoryCorps has collected and archived over 30,000 interviews from more than 60,000 participants. So if you do your math right, you can see that there are more interviews than participants. Well, one really cool thing about StoryCorps is that it captures family members or friends from time to time sharing stories between themselves. So a mother relating to her daughter a growing up experience or a personal struggle. Every story is valuable, and StoryCorps at StoryCorps.org is a resource for you. There are 4 locations. There's one in Atlanta, Chicago, San Francisco, and actually the 4th one is mobile. So who knows where it is tonight, but you have 4 outlets to go in and record your story, and the country and society will be richer for it. And of course, you are so welcome always to call us and share your stories. At A Kind Voice on Books, we'd love to hear those. I'm going to put these resources up on our Goodreads page. They'll also be available on A Kind Voice on Facebook. I'll make a post for these, as well as Dr. John's resources for the National Storytelling Fest and the Timpanogos Storytelling Festival. All of that is available. And Dr. John is going to join our Goodreads group, which is called A Kind Voice on Books, and you can search for it at www.goodreads.com. And check out Bookshelf. Every host who comes on the show that makes a recommendation, they're going to put their books on the bookshelf. And Dr. John's books are going to be listed for you to explore when you have time. And while you're there, say hello. Drop a comment. Make friends with other members in the groups. Tell me what you think about a book. Share your ideas for new content for the show. I would love to explore the opportunity to run a book club, both online and then on the show. And then if you'd like to review a book, it might be cool as a member of A Kind Voice on Books to review books for new writers out there who are looking for some insight. And so I'd like to facilitate that for you if you'd like through our Goodreads group. And so that's it. That's storytelling. That's our Goodreads. I want you to be a part of it. I want to hear from you, and I want you to share as much as you like. And so join us next week on A Kind Voice on Books. I'm Eden Blackwell, and it's been my pleasure to be with you. Have a good one.
A Kind Voice Radio.
Are you looking for that specialized, professional, custom-made voice announcements? Well, look no further. The Voice of Choice is here to help. Specializing in public service announcements, audio for your business and personal needs, special events, and even commercials. We have something here for everyone at a budget just right for you. Please feel free to email your project request at thevoiceofchoice@yahoo.com or give us a call at 678-558-6094. We look forward to servicing your needs.